So good afternoon. We'll continue the topic thyrotoxicosis. This is the part 2. We'll deal with investigations and treatment of thyrotoxicosis. So investigations include the thyroid function test, ultrasound scan neck, FNAC of the thyroid gland, chest X-ray, ECG, CT or MRI of the neck, thyroid autoantibody assay, radioactive iodine uptake study, free thyroxine index, serum thyroglobulin, and TRX test. So thyroid function test, it classically includes the serum total T4, serum total T3, and the serum TSH. Now, additionally, we have to do the free T4 and the free T3 values as well. Serum total T4, the normal value is 5 to 12 microgram per deciliter. Now there are different variations in between labs as well as between countries depending on the unit. Now it's increased in thyrotoxicosis, decreased in hypothyroidism, and maybe normal in T3 thyrotoxicosis. Serum total T3, the normal value is 80 to 190 nanogram per deciliter, increased in thyrotoxicosis and decreased in hypothyroidism. Serum free T4, the normal value is 10 to 30 nanomoles per liter. It is also increased in thyrotoxicosis and decreased in hypothyroidism and is normal sometimes in T3 thyrotoxicosis. The serum free T3, the normal value is 3.5 to 7.5 micromoles per liter. It is increased in thyrotoxicosis as well as in T3 toxicosis. And serum TSH, the normal range is 0.3 to 3.3 milliunits per liter. Now, TSH low means thyrotoxicosis and TSH high means hypothyroidism. This is applicable only in the absence of hypothalamic pituitary disease. So next is ultrasound scan of the neck. It helps to detect the type of the goiter, whether it is solitary nodule or multinodular or diffuse type. You can look for microcalcification, increased vascularity if you suspect malignancy. You can assess the nodes, whether it is enlarged or not, whether it's benign enlargement or malignant type. The relation of the goiter to vital structure, to look for retrosternal extension. Now, in cases where FNAC is not possible, an ultrasound-guided FNAC can be done. Now, FNAC is the investigation choice for diagnosis. It's simple, it's quick, good patient compliance. You can diagnose most of the diagnosis, differential diagnosis, that is colloid nodule, thyroiditis, papillary carcinoma, anaplastic carcinoma, medullary carcinoma, and lymphoma. And it has got 5 gradings. Thigh 1 is non-diagnostic, Thigh 2 is non-neoplastic, and Thigh 3, 4, and 5 are neoplastic. We have the thyroid autoantibody assay. See, the anti-thyroid peroxidase antibody is elevated in 90 to 95% case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis and 70 to 80% of Graves' disease. TSH receptor antibodies are seen in almost 100% of the Graves' disease. Anti-thyroglobulin antibody is seen in both Hashimoto's thyroiditis as well as in a smaller degree of Graves' disease. Next is the radioactive iodine uptake study. Here the uptake of radio-labeled iodine, that is iodine 123 is the one which is used by the gland, will demonstrate the distribution of activity in the whole gland. So you can localize where in the gland is the site of the overactivity, whether the entire gland is showing increased uptake or one particular part is showing increased uptake, or there are multiple parts showing increased uptake. Based on that, you can grade it into Graves' disease, toxic nodule, and toxic MNG. So toxic nodule shows a single area, toxic MNG shows multiple areas, and Graves' disease shows the entire gland having increased uptake. So conditions of increased uptake is Graves' disease, Plummer's disease, toxic adenoma. Even a TSH secreting pituitary tumor will show increased uptake in the gland. Now, decreased uptake is in decurvance thyroiditis. In forms of thyroiditis, you get decreased uptake, even though they may have transient thyrotoxicosis. Then other conditions include struma ovary, where the thyroid tissue is in the ovarian tumor, and the gland as such shows decreased uptake. Thyrotoxicosis factitia, again, the gland is normal. There is no, it shows decreased uptake. In metastatic differential thyroid cancer, already surgery may have been done, and there is total thyroidectomy is done. So it is the metastatic site which shows uptake. So the gland uptake is not there. Now the contraindication of radioiodine scan is basically in children, pregnant women, and lactating mothers. So this is how it looks like. So on the left side, we have the cold nodule. And the entire gland shows some uptake, while the nodule shows no uptake. Then below that, you have the hot nodule where the nodule shows significant uptake, but the rest of the gland is mildly suppressed. Now in Graves' disease, the entire gland shows increased uptake. Now in an adenoma, the nodule itself shows very high uptake such that the remainder of the gland is so suppressed that it shows no uptake. And toxic MNG show multiple areas of increased uptake and low uptake. In thyroiditis, again, it is similar picture where the entire gland shows no or absent uptake. Now, free thyroxine index, it's again supposed to be considered a more reliable indicator of the thyroid status. So usually you can have plasma protein binding abnormalities, which is not considered while measuring the serum T3 and serum T4. So this takes into account of that. So the free thyroid index is a product of serum T4 into the T3 uptake percentage. And T3 uptake basically measures the unbound thyroxine binding globulin. Now this index is increase in hyperthyroidism and decrease in hypothyroidism. It's not routinely done, but it is I'm just mentioning it. So unless serum thyroglobulin may be elevated in thyrotoxicosis. Again, not routinely done. Now the TRH simulation test is basically a test of in the previous years. It used to be done to assess pituitary and hypothalamic dysfunction. It is not routinely done. Now here what happens when the TRH hormone is injected IV, so there is an elevation in the TSH secretion. Usually it is around 4 times the normal value in a normal person. Now this elevation becomes exaggerated in hypothyroidism while it is decreased it's basically used to differentiate between central types of hypothyroidism. But here I'm mentioning it in reference to hyperthyroidism or thyrotoxicosis. So it has shown that in thyroid hormone resistance, it can be showing an exaggerated response, while in hyperthyroidism due to TSH secreting pituitary tumor, it shows no response. Again, this test is not relevant, it's not usually done. Now this is the chart which shows the various tests that we do. So in Graves' disease, the free T3, free T4 values are elevated and the TSH value is low. And that is similar in toxic MNG as well as toxic nodule. Now the antibodies are positive in Graves' disease while they are negative in toxic MNG and toxic nodule. The radioactive iodine uptake is high in Graves' disease while they are mildly increased in toxic nodular goiter and toxic nodule. Now the thyroid scan that shows the entire gland hyperactive in Graves, while it shows multiple areas or the internodular tissue is hyperactive in multinodular goiter, and toxic nodular single area is active. Now going into the treatment. So we have 3 forms of treatment. We have medical therapy, radioactive iodine therapy, and surgical therapy. Now here I want to mention that medical therapy is a co-therapy for both radioactive and surgery, while itself it can be used as a single therapy as well. So we'll go into medical therapy first. So usually indicate in children, young adults, pregnancy, and whenever you plan surgery or you're planning radioiodine therapy, prior to that, to make the patient euthyroid, you can use antithyroid drugs. The advantage when you're using it as a solo therapy, there is no risk of any surgery or its complications. There's no need for any radioiodine therapy or its complications. The hypothyroidism which you induce with the drug is reversible. It's effective and it's tolerated. It can be used in children and young adults and during pregnancy. The disadvantage is that sometimes you may have to give it for 1 to 2 years, so the prolonged therapy is required. Similarly, when you stop it, the patient again becomes toxic. And then the adverse effects of the drugs can happen. So what are the adverse effects? I'll say that after I tell you about the drugs. So Here we have the drugs that inhibit hormone synthesis. So we have propylthiouracil, carbimazole, and methimazole. So carbimazole is a very commonly used drug in hyperthyroidism. 10 milligram TID or 6 hourly, it can be started. And then once you make the patient euthyroid, you can bring it down to a maintenance dose of 5 milligram BID or TID. Now, methimazole is a long-acting antithyroid drug where you can give it as a once daily dose, 20 to 40 milligram. Now, propylthiouracil is again can be given 100 to 150 milligram TID. And once euthyroid, you can bring it down to a maintenance dose of 25 to 50 milligram BD or TID. Now, its primary use is in pregnancy. Otherwise, also routinely we use carbimazole. Now, these drugs all have adverse effects. So, you can have hypothyroidism due to overcorrection. You can have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. You can have skin rashes, arthralgia, fever. Now, the serious side effect, is, though rare, is liver damage, hepatotoxicity, and granulocytosis. So, it is mandated that before you start antithyroid drugs, you must look at the liver function test and the complete blood count, and if possible, even a peripheral smear to make sure that those values are normal. A second group of drugs that are used are the iodides. So we have the Lugol's iodine, that is 5% iodine in 10% potassium iodide solution. The dose is usually 6 to 10 drops once daily or twice daily. It is primarily used preoperatively, that is in the 10 days prior to surgery, for rapid control of hyperthyroidism. So it makes the gland, it shrinks the gland, makes the gland less vascular, and also reduces the hyperthyroidism. The third group of drugs are the beta blockers. So beta blockers will reduce the sympathetic overactivity. At the same time, they'll prevent peripheral conversion of T4 to T3. So propranolol is the drug that is commonly used, 20 to 40 milligram TID. Its primary use again is preoperatively to make the patient euthyroid. So it's used along with the antithyroid drug like carbimazole. Similarly, it is also used in thyrotoxic crisis. So as a summary, carbimazole is given 10 milligram TID and later on you can maintain it at a 50 milligram BD. Propylthiouracil can be given 100 milligram TID or 150 milligram TID, and then you can bring it down to 25 to 50 milligram BD or TID. Propranolol is usually given 20 to 40 milligram TID, and then you can bring it down to a BD dosage. Lugol's iodine is 5 drops BD or once daily. You can give it 10 days prior to surgery. Now, thyroxine has been mentioned because there is a school of thought where, in order to prevent the drug-induced hypothyroidism, so along with the carbimazole, you can give a dose of thyroxine as well as 0.1 mg per day. So it's called block and replace therapy. Now, the second form of therapy is radioactive iodine. So it's usually indicated in primary thyrotoxicosis, but yet we can avoid the younger age group and the elderly age group. Is usually indicated in those in whom surgery cannot be done, or those who have recurrent toxicosis after surgery, or previous history of neck surgeries, in whom a second surgery is to be avoided. Now, contraindication is generally young patients and pregnancy. The advantage is that there's no need of surgery or its complication, and there is no need of prolonged drug therapy. The disadvantage is that an isotope facility is needed, and you have to put the patient on lifelong follow-up. And similarly, there's a risk for permanent hypothyroidism. So here it is not iodine 123. Instead, they use iodine 131, which is the commonly used isotope. It emits alpha and beta particles, and it is concentrated in the thyroid gland. It destroys the cells and causes complete ablation of the thyroid gland. It's usually given as orally as a liquid or capsule as a sodium iodide solution. So now the patient takes around 10 to 12 weeks to become euthyroid. So in the gap, after you give the single dose, you have to keep the patient on antithyroid drugs to keep the patient euthyroid. Now at 12 weeks, you may have to give a second dose or even a third dose later if there is no improvement. Complications. There's a risk for permanent hypothyroidism or thyroid failure. Mild pain and tenderness can be there with the thyroid. There's a risk for hyperparathyroidism. Similarly, those who have Graves' ophthalmopathy or exophthalmos, or even antithyroid antibodies, both can get worsened or increased following radioiodine therapy. Now, though there's no actual risk or it's proven, there's a fear of development of thyroid cancer or fear of development of leukemia and other malignancies. Now, for the pregnant lady, there is a definite risk to the fetus. Malformations, neonatal or fetal hypothyroidism, goiter is known to have occurred. Now, the third element is surgical therapy. It's usually indicated when medical therapy fails, or else it is indicated in toxic nodule, toxic nodular goiter, and Graves' disease. Also in a large goiter with pressure symptoms or suspicion of malignancy. Now, for any surgery, the patient has to be euthyroid. So the patient has to be on antithyroid drugs, and if need be on beta blockers as well as iodide if required, or else antithyroid drugs and beta blocker alone may be enough to make the patient euthyroid prior to surgery. So for the Graves' disease or diffuse toxic goiter, previously they used to do subtotal thyroidectomy. Today there is a school that thinks that total thyroidectomy is best, as recurrence is possible after subtotal thyroidectomy, and surgery for recurrence is difficult and usually associated with nerve injury. Hence, total thyroidectomy is a preferred option for many. Similarly, for toxic nodular goiter, again, previously subtotal thyroidectomy is to be done. Today, near total or total thyroidectomy is also considered. And for toxic nodule, hemotherapy is usually adequate. The advantages of surgical therapy is that there is no, the problems of radioiodine therapy can be avoided. You can actually get tissue for histopathology study, and it is usually showing better results for retrosternal toxic goiter, for those with Graves' ophthalmopathy, and for women who are planning surgery, so planning children. Now, the disadvantage is that whenever you leave behind some amount of thyroid tissue, like as in subtotal or near total, there's a risk for recurrent thyrotoxicosis. The second element is the complications of the surgery itself. Then there's a risk for hypothyroidism and hypoparathyroidism. And the person has to be on lifelong medications. However, hypothyroidism is preferred as compared to hyperthyroidism. The complications of surgery include respiratory obstruction, bleeding or hemorrhage, rectal nerve paralysis, hypothyroidism, hypoparathyroidism, thyrotoxic crisis, wound infection, keloid scar, and stitch granuloma. So now once you perform surgery, the patient has to be on follow-up, and the primary aim is to look for hypothyroidism and hypoparathyroidism, as well as if you have done a subtotal or a near total thyroidectomy, then to detect recurrent thyrotoxicosis. So for that, you have to keep the patient on regular follow-up and conduct thyroid function tests every 3 to 6 months, as well as serum calcium if hypoparathyroidism is suspected. Now, for those who have the ophthalmopathy or dermopathy, that also has to be managed in the subsequent post-operative period. So summary, so thyrotoxicosis is more common in females, and the commonest cause for primary thyrotoxicosis is Graves' disease, and it's usually diagnosed by clinical features, thyroid function test, radioiodine scan, and autoantibody titers, besides the ultrasound of the neck and the FNAC. And the three forms of treatment are antithyroid drugs, radioiodine therapy, and surgical therapy. So thank you.